Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Production Podcast with myself and Fionn. Before we kick off today's episode, I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone that's listening. It's great to see all the responses that we're getting online. So from Fionn and myself, thank you so much, and please continue to like and subscribe. We've got some great guests coming up and we're really excited to sort of share with you our plans for season 2 next year. But on to today's guest, Anna Cartwright, the brilliantly amazing Anna Cartwright, the funny Anna Cartwright. Anna, I met you whilst we worked at McCann together. And obviously I met you there as an agency producer. It's sort of part of the craft network that McCann have, IPG have. But I never asked you in the years that we've been very, very close friends, like how on earth it all started for you. So I suppose that's my first question. Where did this all start?
So my dad is a corporate film, was a corporate film director, which is basically sort of filming oil tanks, and and then I would go on the film shoots with him as a runner, and I would log, which is obviously no longer even a job now, log all the shots that were right of sort of essentially a million talking heads of different people in different very grey offices. And I just thought, God, I love this. And then did a few jobs in that world and ended up working for kind of more of a content production company, which sent me around Greek and basically the Canary Islands, where, Lanzarote, Fuerteventura, filming Thompson hotels, which sounded as, a 21-year-old like the absolute dream job, because it was, 4 months in Canary Islands filming hotels. But it was this sort of crew of 5 of us. And as a producer, when you're a crew of 5, you are basically also everything else, like chief bottom wiper in every sense. And it was like, and we had to get up and we would be doing a different hotel nearly every day. And there are so many hotels. I don't think I'd ever eaten so much buffet food in my life. And it was, so I basically did that and it was amazing. But again, very small. And then just sort of since then, just went more production company side when I moved to a company called Armory, sort of funded by a really good couple of friend of mine's, and started producing there. We did a lot of music videos and did a lot of work for did a lot of diamonds, which was always very interesting because they're basically shooting a diamond is one of the most complicated things ever, because they are eternally dirty and there is nothing that you can do to make them clean. And then from there kind of got picked up by McCann and made the move from production company producer to agency producer, which was quite bizarre at first, because as a production company producer, I always felt that agency producers didn't do very much, because you feel like you're doing all the work, which is completely not the case. So then I was at McCann, and then I've sort of recently been at McCann for sort of nearly 5 years, and have recently at the moment at Leo's, which is great. So that's kind of a bit of my background.
So just carrying on from what you said, so obviously you were production company side and then you moved to agency side. But just to go right back to the beginning of that, so did you go to university? Did you study something marketing, advertising related?
No, I didn't. I did an English degree. So everyone said, so you're going to be a teacher, which is what everyone, but yeah, I really didn't do anything related to in terms of my sort of university choice. But I got I was really, really, really into drama growing up. And I loved acting, and I loved directing, and I loved producing. And so I think that kind of started a little bit for me at university. It's organisation, which I think is a really sad way of describing why producing is fun, but it's organisation alongside like really strong people skills, and just working out what is going to get everyone to do something in a way that they're not going to resent it, and they're going to have fun with it, and they're going to give the best, and they're going to give you the best from it. I just think being nice and kind and empathetic and intuitive with people is just the best way to work. And that's, Adam, obviously we worked together for ages, but just being able to have...
Yeah, you're a nightmare.
Absolute crackpot.
People skills, what a load of bollocks. Yeah.
I think we've probably had a similar enough journey Anna, in the sense that like I would have started out kind of production company side, and then did a lot of the different jobs like the running and the production
Yeah.
managing, and then kind of the producing, agency producing. Um, and I found it, yeah, I found quite funny your kind of comment of like when you're the production company producer, you kind of think like, what's the agency producer doing? And then you're the agency producer, and you kind of realize very quickly what they're doing. But yeah, where like, so where do you think the journey will take you? Like if you were to look ahead to kind of 10 years down the line, I mean, where do you see yourself?
Um, Gosh, I think it's funny, isn't it? I think I like the kind of hybrid nature of my experience because it's helpful on both sides. And I think I would like to be in a position where I'm quite comfortably working across both with production company and agencies simultaneously, because I think you just learn so much and have so much more understanding for each other's role. It'd be interesting now to go back to a production company role and work with an agency producer and actually knowing that they've got a really hard job rather than being like, why can't you get this all approved so we could actually make it? But no, I over the next over the next few years, I just want to kind of absorb and work as on as many things as possible. I'm kind of want to be a bit sponge-like and just learn and meet new people, and I think and then I don't know, maybe in 10 years be in a role where I'm supporting others do the same thing. And I like the kind of casting element of a more senior role in production agencies of who is right for something and who is the right person to do a certain job and who has the right attitude for a certain thing. And I find that incredibly interesting, and who the right fit is. And it's weird because it's like management. You don't get trained for it, do you? You just kind of do it. But it's a whole skill in itself. But production's quite a good head start because you do that in production naturally when you go, I want this kind of editor because he's actually the kind of person that's going to throw this at it, and he's just going to, or I need this kind of director, or I need this kind of producer because I need someone that's a bit of a hard, baller and is going to really keep things really process driven. And I like that. I like that casting when it comes to putting a team together.
That's really that's actually fascinating, I think, because I've never referred to it as casting before, but that is exactly what it is. Like when you were thinking about what director would be right, or what producer would be right, or what DOP would be right. So yeah, that's you are absolutely spot on, and I think. But look, I would. It sounds like then that you're either talking about a head of production role or an MD role. Like we've had some wonderful chats with people, and say like Chris Watling, who was at Droga as a head of production, has just kind of started as and kind of moved to some such to be the MD there. So he kind of goes from that, yeah, like agency side back to kind of production side. But I imagine a lot of that role will involve that casting element that you kind of mentioned, about who's right for this. Like, and a brief comes in, maybe they're already having a director in mind, but who's the producer? Does that director have a producer? If not, who would be the right one? And so that's, that's what I was interested.
Yeah, I think I think when the hardest part, I think in production, is the earlier stages when I was a production manager, is like, that's when you have to just know stuff. Like you just have to know everything and solve all the problems and do it, and you're on the ground. And I mean, I think of my Fiat 500, I had like a Fiat 500, and then for a music video, I had an urn in my car with boiling hot water, and I was like reversing it so people could have coffee because we had, 15 grand to make a music video. And like, I mean, God, that was actually a decent budget. But, and from that kind of time where you had to know everything, you think, oh, I couldn't possibly just, move into production company side because you have to have all this information. Actually, at a much more senior level, it's so not about the practicalities, because you've got all these amazing, brilliant people that do that just for a living and can just sort of shoot out and know exactly who to go to all the time. On that kind of agency producer level, and then I think that more senior head of production MD role, it's exactly that. It's just, I might not always know the answer, but I know who will. And I think that attitude of, but when you first start, you think that you are going to need to know, and people go, I need 2 washing machines for a shoot that are working, but I need to plumb them, and you kind of go into panic. You say, and you're never going to know the answer to that, but you'll probably know someone after a certain amount of time in this industry who will know. That whole kind of resourcing element of it, which is a very boring way of putting it, but is what I love. It's the putting it together, the planning, the kind of the why somebody is right for something. And it comes also so much down to personality at points, especially when it comes to producer relationships, I think, which I think is such an important, the agency producer to production company producer, which can be really fraught if it doesn't go right. But when it's right, it's like, that is the ultimate team in my head. Like you've obviously got your creative team on one side and the production company producer have got their director. But if you can have if the two of you are working together fundamentally as the core team in terms of making it happen, I think you get such an amazing result out of it, and a really nice closeness with whoever you're working with, because you're getting it from both of you are getting it from every side. And so it's that unity. And that's why I've enjoyed being both roles, because I've got empathy for both roles, I guess, and which is always nice.
Yeah. When you're working with people that you get along with, and like you say, the vibe is right and the energy is right, then it makes it so much easier as a job. And yeah, I totally agree with you in terms of like casting for the job. Who's the sound designer, who's this guy, who's that, and you will know in your head after many years of working with so many different people what sort of team you're assembling. For instance, my question now is, would you assemble a certain team for a certain project based on it, for instance, like being a bit more of a comedy style spot, or would you assemble a team based on it being a bit more of a serious kind of heartfelt emotional spot, like the UN one we did?
Yeah, I was going to say, for a producer, I think creatively, in terms of the output, obviously there's the kind of creative casting element of it, which is one of the most important parts of the agency producer role, in terms of curating that director's list and trying to find somebody that's potentially a bit newer and a bit more exciting and isn't the kind of same name that we've seen a lot, or finding somebody that is the big name but could be an interesting turn for them. And there's the creative part, but for me, I think what I love that, but what I almost love even more, which is kind of the more practical element of it, which is who, for example, when you've got jobs where you've got so little time and you've got challenging budgets, and you're working for a charity like we did on the UN, and it's sometimes a huge amount of time is about personality and and the right kind of love that people are going to put into it, and why somebody might be a good role for it, like a DOP, for example, who might have less experience than somebody else that you might want, but is going to actually go and spend 2 extra days shooting it because they really want to add elements. And I think it's more about finding people with passion for it, and they're going to recognise the team element. I mean, I absolutely love, one of my favourite parts of this job is also sort of also the most terrifying, is where you suddenly get this new job and everyone has to meet up on a call because you've suddenly got to make like 1 million assets in like 3 weeks, and you've got to do an activation, and you've got to put a bloody blown up sausage in the air and you've got to, everyone's sitting there in that first meeting going like, what, like, how are we gonna, we've got to put a blimp, that's the shape of a hot dog flying over the whole of England, and then we've also got to do like 50 million films off the back of it, and we're going to do a radio, and we're going to do this, and everyone's just sort of sitting there in panic. And I just love that moment of being like, right, okay, like I'm going to go find and that kind of division. And that's where it's like, then the people that are in the room for that's the real casting for me, because that's like the energy, like you, like Adam, you're good like this, and then that kind of excites you, right? That, because like, I mean, terrifying but exciting. But I don't sleep and I lose all my nails and a lot of hair. It's like a glut. It's like it's like you're getting your fix. It's very unhealthy, really. It's really very unhealthy.
So, Anna, if you had to pick, right, say if 2 jobs came up at the same time, like, we've got this job, and they're both looking for a producer, is it the one that would be the most kind of demanding and chaotic and uncertain in your mind? Would that be the one you'd pick, as opposed to the kind of, we've got a 1-day studio shoot in a studio in London with a family of 4?
Yeah, I think if it obviously it depends on the creative, if they're like, I've just gone freelance, and the first job I'm now with Leo's for the next sort of few months, but It was interesting going freelance because it's been so busy, and there were lots of things that are sent to you, and like, oh, do you want to do this, and do you want to do this, and but then also the kind of simpler, like you say, studio. It so depends on the creative and the opportunity to work with people. And to be honest, I like doing both, because if you spend your life doing the crisis ones, you just don't sleep.
You lose all your hair.
Yeah, I lose my hair, and I don't have much. So it's I guess it's a balance, really. It's a balance of the two. And sometimes it's really nice just to do the classic TV production process where you've got, good time, good client, good money, and, it's a process. But I think if you do that too long, you can get complacent. And I like the challenge of being thrown a sausage-shaped blimp that they need up in two days.
Obviously, one of the great benefits of working at McCann at the time that we did was, you were very empowered to take kind of charge if you wanted to, and sort of use the team there. It was an integrated production company. You had print, digital, everything there. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, you picked up a lot of stuff there. Do you though? Did it take you a while as, say, a younger, pretty great hotshot producer to be listened to by the people within the agency, or do you find that as a sort of younger great producer, it's sort of all about your confidence, the way you present yourself? Like, do you ever find a challenge when you're working on the bigger jobs, because people might, I suppose my question is, do you think people judge you for your age? Because obviously you've accomplished quite a lot for someone of like who's worked in the industry for X amount of time versus, say, who like a Chris Watling, who's been in it for maybe 10 years more and has had loads of exposure. Like, have you found that you come up against any barriers as a younger producer?
Definitely. I think I've always been really conscious of my age.
Interesting.
Because I feel like and I've had it before with bosses where they're like, and it's funny, you'd never do it the other way around. You'd never be like, oh my God, you're so old. How can you still, but you are kind of fairly immediately, especially sometimes working with production companies and people that have been doing it a really long time, and you do feel immediately a little judged for your age, I guess, because you just haven't got, they understand that you physically haven't got the amount of years, which is completely true. You haven't got the amount of years of experience, but obviously production changes so much. So I think that it's about having balance. I definitely found at McCann, I was very conscious of it. And I've had many instances in different places of, oh my God, you're that old, and then you're lucky to be, you're kind of, and so people feel almost like you kind of cheated your way here, which is I've always found challenging. But I then do find it's about earning your stripes. So whenever I've worked with those kind of people, I've then worked with, like, actually they've met them and they've kind of done the usual kind of age reaction, and then I've worked with them, and and then you kind of gain the respect that way.
Prove yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Prove yourself based on your skill, because I'm also a really strong believer in you should hire for attitude and then train for skill and experience. So, like, for me, it's like there's a lot of people that I've worked with or got into production, like a lot of friends of mine that have been doing different things and haven't really been working out, and they've just got the right energy for production, the right level of like chronic anxiety, and or the right kind of, they worry about everything, but they they just have this kind of the right energy. They're people, and they kind of full of life. And they have no production experience, but then I've brought them into production, and and then they become production assistants and production managers and producers so quickly, because I so often think people hiring on skill is such a pointless thing. It's you've got to hire on attitude, especially in production, because it's all about attitude. It's all about being open-minded and being, And I think that's where sometimes this industry goes wrong, or a lot of industries go wrong, is they hire on skill and things can be trained. Practicalities of how things work are just learnable, whereas attitude isn't.
Anna, when you're saying attitude, do you think is it also, or is it kind of like mindset?
Yes.
in the sense of like you mentioned earlier, like empathy and that kind of stuff. Is that what you mean when
Yes,
you
I think,
say attitude?
yeah, I do. I mean, I don't mean attitude in like a kind of sense of ego and ballsiness, I guess. I mean, like, I actually think it's almost about being ego-less to a certain extent,
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
and 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 being prepared to release a little bit of your own ego to get something done. And I think it's more just when I see people that you can say, God, you'd be great in production. It's naturally the kind of the obvious things, the kind of organization, the practicality, but there's also just the energy to power something through positively.
Yeah.
yeah.
100%.
No, because do you know what it makes me think of as well is the idea of like what you could refer to as like a growth mindset. So like somebody asks you to do something or somebody asks something of you, it's very easy to kind of go, oh, I don't know, or I can't do that, or I have no idea. Whereas a growth mindset is one where, yeah, I'll figure that out. I don't know, but I'm going to work it out, or I'm going to be able to do that. And I think producers, some of the best producers, are people that just get things done. It doesn't matter that they don't know how to do it; they will figure it out, or they'll find someone to do it. They'll cast the right person to head up that team, and that's the real kind of value I think in a producer. You know that there is nothing that a great producer cannot do.
But you know what? It's interesting. I totally agree with that. But in my head, I also think there's one great advantage to, well, you're allowed to be that person if you are given time, which I think in our industry sometimes we don't have. But when we are given the time to, for instance, figure something out like that, if you're one of these people that's like, you know what, I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to figure it out, Bosh, which I definitely would say a lot of the people I work with are like that. But if you're given the time and it's almost like the trust by your head of production or whatever to do that, then it's just the most rewarding thing, because once you do eventually achieve that sort of little goal that you set yourself to do, it just feels amazing, doesn't it? But it's also like a piece of work. If you're given the time to craft it, it's always better. You know, if you try and rush things, you're lucky if it's amazing. But if you've been given that extra half day, it's surprising what you can add.
Yeah, and it's so important to have those kind of conversations with people really early on. I always say to, like, I used to always say when I was sort of in production company about, like, you can actually always get most things done for most amounts of money. Like, there's always a way to do it. And I've always had to sort of explain this to clients before. And I've always really liked as a producer having relationships with clients, because I feel like it otherwise becomes this kind of very archaic, old fashioned, like, oh, the client's coming in. And rather than actually, I think clients actually love talking to producers, because it's just, you're talking to kind of the person that's making it happening. But I always say, and I've said it a number of times to a few clients, we can do it for less money, but you have to take on, and we can do it for less time. We can do whatever you want, but you have to take on risk. I'm telling you it's going to cost this much and you need this much time so that it's less risky. But if you want me to shoot this for, 200 quid, and, then I can, in theory, do it. It just might not look good, sound good. We might get kicked out of a location. The police might turn up. We might, the hard drive that breaks because we haven't got a backup. And what I mean is you can do anything you want to do. It's just when you get to a point of an advertising agency, things are expensive. Adverts are expensive because we have to cover ourselves. And that's where you need this person, you need this assistant, you need an extra person. And that's one thing that I learned so much from doing promos originally, is that I've done more complicated shoots for like a 16th of the budgets that I've had at McCann. And it's all because it's music videos, and the attitude is like, well, let's just not get a location license. Let's just go and just do it in the corner, or let's just, shoot that let's just do that on our mobile phones here. Or, I mean, not that that was the case back then, but, it's all about risk in that situation. It's not about budget and time. And it's interesting when you tell clients that, they're like, oh no, we would rather be low risk. We'll give you the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I just believe you can do anything. You can do anything. We can make anything happen. It's how risky. And I think one of the lesson I learned, which was one of the best lessons I learned from McCann, I think, is the kind of the empathy for the client as well. And obviously we talked about the kind of the team that you build and the people around you and how you make something happen and getting the right personalities in the room to make the right work. But I think that unless you the us and them client to agency thing is so problematic, I think, and means work is so much worse. And I think if they're just empathy is so important both ways round, and to understand why a client is making brash, quick, wrong decisions and panic decisions half the time can be talked down with just an empathetic conversation of like, why are you worried about this out of interest? Is it the money? Is it the scale? Like what is the real problem that this scene is an issue? And generally it's got nothing, you're trying to fix something based on an interpretation through an account person of what they think the client is worried about, when really it's like just a little bit of empathy and understanding of what they're actually worried about, and you can solve the problem much quicker and everyone feels much more understood. But that's another thing that I really try and do whenever I work, and try and, with that kind of client relationship and trust is just really important, I think.
Anna, I'm gonna jump back a bit here and ask a question. You were chatting about the early jobs with your dad and all that stuff, and if and when you were at uni and directing the kind of the theater and stuff, if your dad hadn't been a director, do you how do you think it kind of would have panned out after uni? Like, would you have kind of followed that kind of interest in what would you have done? Like, say your dad wasn't directing and you didn't have that avenue, but you just finished uni, you'd done some directing, and you had that interest. Like, what do you think you would have done?
I think about this a lot because I think, nepotism is such a problem in our industry, and I am a complete I've got into this industry from knowing, from my dad getting me my first running job, and it's an industry that a lot of people in the normal world don't really know is even really a thing, to a certain extent, like production. I mean, they know it, but they just wouldn't know how to even start. And I think I probably would have ended up doing something related to, publishing or journalism or something still in the media. But really, I didn't know that there was no part of my schooling or my university that kind of showed me that this world existed, apart from the very fortunate element that my dad worked. And I think that he is the reason that I then got into this, and then met a producer that I basically fell in love with and became my mentor and still is, and just thought she was amazing. And that's why I carried on into it.
Yeah. Tell me, the mentor relationship. Like, how did that start with your mentor, and why did it blossom so well? Like, why do you think that?
I think a little bit like
it's still so strong. Sorry.
I think she was Tamsin is a amazing producer and has been doing it for a very long time, and has completely got my ethos in terms of, she taught me the ethos really of just kind of kindness and teamwork. And I saw her work with my dad on maybe 2 jobs, and she worked with me, and my dad was like, would you mind, seeing if Anna could help you out on the next couple of things? And we just kind of fell in love with each other. We just, that wonderful relationship that you have, production manager, production assistant, or producer, production manager, where you're just sorting things out together and you're solving problems, and it's just so bloody satisfying. And I found the way that she did things and the way that she treated people and the way that she spoke to people so kind and so rewarding in terms of what she got back. Like, she was just enormously respected by others, and people will do anything for her because of the way how she is, and had to have some very, very difficult conversations, and she's always then sort of guided me in my career onwards, but not so much, not in such a practical, like, what are your goals and what do you want to do next? Just more in a sense of self care and nourishment, which I think is so important. And where mentorship, sometimes it can be very practical and like, let's get your goals and let's like structure your, you structure what you want to do and what who do you want to be? And I actually think sometimes mentors should really be more just about like nourishing that person's personality and nourishing each other and sharing kind of disaster situations and how you got out of them. And production can be really lonely, I think. being a producer can be really lonely because you're not in a pair. Account teams have got like 5 of them. You're not in like a post house where you've got all of your other operators. You can production. There's one producer on a job, and it can be very lonely. So I think camaraderie amongst producers is so important. I think relationships with the producers is so important.
And it's interesting because you're not the only person that we've sort of interviewed to have said that, or chatted to have said that. And when do you think you look to your mentor most? Is it a particularly hard job that makes you reach out, or is it just kind of like maybe a bit of a low moment when you're just a bit overwhelmed with all the stuff you have to do, or when are you reaching out to these people the most, or when are you looking for that kind of almost validation slash sort of little gem of sentence, you know?
I think actually, and this is maybe more, I had sort of different people to do different things, but like, you know, different people that you call for different panicked situations, or whether you want, but for you know, Adam, we both, our very good friend, Tom, producer as well. And, you know, I love the fact that I'll call him or he'll call me and be like, bugger, how much is like, I'm in this crisis and I need to get this printed by Sunday. It needs to go live here. And you kind of, and we're on, you know, work for different companies, and you then kind of work together on a solution, and also back each other on like, this is also not your fault. Like half the problems producers have to deal with, we like engulf them into our being, and they become our whole problem. It's like we are completely responsible for solving them, and sometimes they're just not solvable, and certain conversations need to be had. But that's where you need the other producers to just to go like, oh, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. And if none of that works, it's actually not your fault because this should have happened. And you can just get that kind of backing of like, yeah, okay, no, yeah, you're right. I don't need to, you know, I don't need to get the sausage blimp up tomorrow. It's just not possible. Okay, yeah, great.
I can say now that Tom in particular is going to be really happy that your example is a sausage blimp.
It's actually his example. He actually had to try and get a sausage blimp, and he was
That's
just
so funny.
He was actually pulling it. He was like, Anna, and he called me. I was like, Tom, I don't know if I can help you. And I've had to do blimp research for something else, non-sausage related blimp research recently, and it just reminded me of it. But yeah, it's so important. It's so important, that camaraderie. And it, like I say, it can be very lonely otherwise, and very stressful, especially in the early stages when you're less experienced. You just need somebody to say, this is actually not that big of a problem.
I think you're spot on, like absolutely spot on, and it is often a lonely role as a producer. So do you know? And you mentioned their disasters and their disastrous moments. So immediately, I've got to ask, right? In your years of experience producing at all the various agencies and now freelance, what is the moment that you think back on as the kind of most disastrous kind of scenario where everything was going against you and you thought, I just can't believe it, and I don't know what to do, or this is just, I hate everything. What was that moment like from a production perspective?
Yeah, that kind of I'm going to vomit moment. I want to die inside. And I've had a few, but some that are not that, you know, some that are just like, oh God, I missed this approval, or which haven't been that interesting. But I've had two that are, one which was very, very early on in my career. Well, not that early on. I was production managing, and it was quite a big commercial for this is De Beers, the diamond company, and it was, I had all the petty cash for like a 5-day shoot, and and we, on the last night, we went out and had our big rap night. Ended up in karaoke, and I lost all the receipts, and I woke up the next day, and I was like, what am I going to do? Like, maybe I just work for free for a year so that they can like pay off what they can't claim. Like the panic, I think that's one of the very earlier points of just like utterly wanting to just throw up. And anyway, 4 days, I called my boss and I was like, something awful's happened. And I was like, and I said at the beginning, it's okay if you fire me. It's totally fireable offence, but I've lost all the receipts. And she was like, oh, it's okay. We'll work it out. And I was like, oh. And anyway, it turns out my dad got a call. And I'd also lost my passport, which was with all the receipts for some reason. And I got a call from my dad 5 days later saying, hey, Lucky Voice in Farringdon have called me because I'm your emergency contact on your passport. They've got your passport and a load of cash and 2 big wallets of receipts.
Oh, God.
So that was embarrassing. And then the other one was a recent one, which was a job where the talent on set, we had a stills shoot happening in one part of town, and then I was producing the film. And I was agency and production company producing because it was a kind of in-house offering. The talent basically was at the still shoot and kind of just said, I don't want to do the storyboards for the film shoot, which he was at that point supposed to be at, but he was late at the stills. So we had to, the director, me and the creatives and the first AD had to essentially leave the film shoot set where everyone was there, move over to the still shoot and essentially renegotiate what we were going to shoot in that day while we were supposed to be shooting it in a different location, and basically negotiate with the talent what he would do, and then basically rewrite the whole story and recast the whole story in about 20 minutes and then shot it. And then we did shoot it, and it was kind of amazing. But that was like, I remember me and the
squeaky bum time.
It was so squeaky. It was an excellent, amazing, genius creative director, Matt Crabtree, was on that job with me. And I just remember the amount of times we just looked at each other like, this is really bad. This is really, really bad.
Do you know what though? Like,
we're actually,
having worked with Matt, there is no better person you'd want in that situation that I can think of.
He is the absolute king of crisis.
But also just the speed at which his brain works, unbelievable.
Well, what do you think makes, and I mean, I don't know Matt now, but what do you think makes him like so good in that scenario in terms of like the traits that he has? Like what does he have that?
Nervous energy, endless nervous energy, in a really good way. And I think that he's just constantly thinking. His mind just works incredibly fast. He kind of, I mean, he talks. I recognise a lot of similarities in that. And he said to me, "It's just a bit like crack, isn't it? This job, you kind of just go for it, and you love it, and it's awful, and you're panicking, and you've lost all your nails, and it's just so awful, but you just love it." And it's like this sort of, I don't know what this is, pseudo-masochism? Masochism, is that how you say it? It's like, it's bizarre why we all get such a thrill out of being so chronically stressed and anxious. But
you know, to go entirely full circle though, the thing as well that I really admire about Matt is just he's so nice and he's so empathetic,
exactly,
and it's exactly what you started off this whole conversation with, and it's funny we've gone full circle. There's just never a moment where he knows you're doing your best and everyone's going to do their best, and so you don't need to sort of throw your toys out the pram and sort of go mad.
No, and he gets the best out of people. He gets the best out of people, which I think is because he is kind. And I think like kindness is just everything in this industry, because it's not a very kind place in terms of what we're asking people to do in the time, and so let's make it better for each other.
So as my last question then, Anne's, to you, it's what would you like to see more of within our industry?
I'd like to see the boundaries broken down a little bit in terms of, you know, what can and shouldn't be done, and the kind of the rules and the way, the kind of very traditional approach to things. I'd like to. God, actually, I don't feel it's such a wishy-washy answer, but I feel like sometimes we are producing things in a structure that is outdated and inflexible. And I think that I'd like to see in the future like a bit more of flexibility and open-mindedness to the way things are produced. And I don't know, and I think that kind of can go across a variety of different kind of, whether it's production company relationships or whether it's creatives or how things are built. I just feel like advertising is built on this kind of old-fashioned form of how things work and which departments and what does this, and you know, I just find sometimes we're running on a model that feels a little outdated. I respect agencies hugely when they approach it the way that people do business differently. That's probably very I don't know, that's probably very waffly and makes absolutely no sense.
It's interesting, very interesting. I think 'cause there's a lot of different kind of production models now that we're seeing.
Yeah.
I'm seeing, you got the TV shoot, obviously, but the kind of social shoots and the smaller crews and now influencers who are creating content themselves, like for brands, which is another interesting one, but like charging some serious coin for it. But that's a very interesting perspective. My last question for you, Anna, is if you don't mind, again, kind of coming off the back of like all those wonderful things you were saying about being nice and about being empathetic and just casting the right people to work with the right people for the ultimately for the sake of the creative and the sake of the job. But we work in an industry that is naturally full of tension and kind of conflict of interest. So we don't have enough time or we don't have enough budget to do something. How do you deal with conflict on a set?
In terms of in a practical sense of things going wrong on set, or kind of more broadly conflict in terms of we haven't got enough money to do this kind of thing.
I would say probably just more in broad sense, like in the idea of like as producers, we're often on set and we experience conflict. Like somebody wants this and then the other person wants that. The client wants to do another take and the director says, I already got it. Or the conflict of, the director would like to do an additional shot, but we don't have the money there or whatever it might be. But yeah, like how do you deal, like in a kind of top level of like, how do you parry conflict, or how do you deal with those situations that are stressful and conflicting, and what is your approach to conflict?
I've never been like hugely scared of conflict in the sense that it's not, because I think most of those kind of situations can, with clarity, which is like my ultimate goal in everything, despite this very not very clear answer. I think with clarity and conversation, you can work out what the problem is for each person. And I always believe there is a solution that can please, or at least half please, both parties. When it comes to sort of money and schedule, I find them that the easier conversations to have because they're just facts. It gets to a point where it's like this, you just can't afford to do it this way. And it just comes, it's just, for me, it's just like a supermarket analogy of like, you want to make a nice meal, but you can't afford all the ingredients. You don't start like negotiating with a shopping cashier being like, yeah, but what if you did this? What if you did that? And, you have to just take some things off out of your basket because you can't afford it. And that's the budget ones are easier. It's the egos that are the trickiest when it comes to confrontation. But then I think with communication, you can usually work through most. I've never had it where it's got so bad that anything really bad has happened, because I think really it's communication.
Guys, and then, just on that note, I'm sat here in my lounge and I look out my window and guess what's flying by? A sausage blimp.
A sausage blimp. I did it!
You did it, Anna.
I found play.
No, honestly, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And I think there's a lot to take away from what you said in terms of kind of the communication, and it's really nice to hear. So thanks, Anna.
No, it was. Thanks, Anna. It was such a lovely chat, and I learned plenty of stuff, and it's just fantastic. But these are the kind of chats that like you say, right? Like producing can be a bit of a lonely business, but just kind of talking production with other people is always fun for me, and that's really the reason for the podcast, and we'll hopefully get people in our industry tuning in and having those conversations, and maybe maybe you'll call your mentor there and have a conversation, because don't let COVID stop that.
No, definitely we need to go. I mean, it usually involves wine and nibbles as well, which is quite a good.
I mean, that's a staple, isn't it? Yeah, it's a staple.
Yeah. Guinness and whiskey for us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much, Hannah. It's been brilliant.
Thanks so much.
So, you've been listening to the Production Podcast with me, Adam Smythe, and Fionn Gregor. Tune in next week for more guests and fun chats. Till then, talk soon.